If you are a Denver Broncos fan, you are going to love the night and day difference between Sean Payton and Vic Fangio and former coaches that we have had here when it comes to how he is going to choose the 53 for this 53-man roster, how we're going to see that play out on Sunday night against the Arizona Cardinals, that, a ton more. Also, the most important question I think I've ever asked the chat. We're going to get to all that and way more in just a second here. If you're new to the channel, I'm Ben. I'm a diehard Denver Broncos fan, and if you like the Denver Broncos and actually believe in what we're doing, it helps me out a ton if you would smash that like and subscribe button. So before we hop in, I just want to put out my flaws on the line for all y'all to see, so that then no one hits me up in the chat about it. I am a Sean Payton apologist. I love him. I believe what Dick Vermeil said about him, that he's one of the best offensive coaches of the past decade. I believe what Tony Dungy said. I believe that the richest owner in sports wouldn't have a chump running this team. So just being out in front of it, that my takes, this is how they're responded to by others. I had a chance every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. I hop on the AFC West Roundtable and have a bunch of Vegas Raiders say really mean things about me. So if you want to stick up for your boy or just laugh at the funny things I say, but after some of my takes, this is the response that I'll get.
Secondly, find somebody that loves you like Ben loves Sean Payton.
It's true. I'm not even going to try to hide it. I love Sean Payton. I love what he's doing here, and just the massive difference that we are seeing between him and Vic Fangio in particular, but really all coaches. He is an old school dude, so you would expect an old school dude who's in the Bill Parcells coaching tree to do things in an old school way, right? Which is kind of like a deficit approach of all right, what is our biggest weak point and how do we shore up that weak point? But if you think about successful organizations, that they aren't deficit driven, they are asset driven. So they're hey, let's take our strengths and make our strengths absolutely unstoppable rather than just trying to pave over a pothole. And it's I work in education as my actual job, and that's what we're starting to do in education with kids. Hey, rather than just trying to help them get incrementally better at something they're weak at, what is their superpower and what can they add to the world, and how can we put that on display? So if you think about Steph Curry, if Steph Curry came up and was oh, I'm not a great rebounder and my ball handling is not that great. It's dude, you're the best shooter in the history of the planet. Don't worry about that one thing you can't do. Don't put all of your effort into getting incrementally better at your one deficit. Instead, lean into your asset and make it absolutely kick butt. And that is how Sean Payton is approaching this Denver Broncos cut down with the 53-man roster. He is going at it with an asset based. We've heard that so many times. He talked about how he does not have set numbers of different players that we're going to keep on the 53. So some coaches come in and are hey, we're going to keep 5 receivers, 8 O-linemen, whatever. Sean Payton, it changes every single year. Last year, the Denver Broncos only had 4 wide receivers. This year, it's going to be hard to get that number under 7, especially with how the new kicking rules have changed. And last year we had 2 quarterbacks. This year, looks like we're going to go with 3 because Sean Payton believes in leaning into his assets. And we're going to get to him talking about that in a second. But do you remember the first ever Vic Fangio press conference? What did Vic Fangio do? He did not praise the best player on this team, the best defensive player in the Super Bowl era of this team, and Von Miller. He actually went at one of Von's deficits and was oh, there's some things we need to clean up with Von, rather than leaning into what makes him have those superpowers of being one of the best pass rushers in the history of the NFL. So I love that even though Sean Payton brings that old school stuff, which has worked to build the culture and chemistry of this team, he also is bringing in this new Fortune 500 startup mentality of, hey, let's lean into what makes us better than others and really exploit that. And so you hear him talk here. He's asked, hey, would you carry 3 quarterbacks? And again, old school philosophy would be no, my old depth chart here says we only have 2 quarterbacks, and listen to what he has to say.
I think we've studied 14 last year, the 32 teams, just under half the league. And I know the rule recently changed where if in fact you do, this came after the 49ers-Eagles game, that third comes up without any count, and so, but ultimately, I think most importantly, you're really looking at your assets when we make that decision.
Most importantly, it is looking at your assets, not trying to incrementally improve at your weakness, but really what is the one thing that we can do? And that's we know Sean Payton's looking for his joker, and we're going to see some different players take that new role. There's some poised breakout players on this team who are able to execute Sean Payton's system in an incredible way. And so I'm so thrilled with just this new energy that we're seeing from Sean and his fingerprints all over this team, and seeing that they believe as well, and just seeing the different body language that we see every single preseason game on the sideline, and dudes hyped in ways that they weren't under previous administrations. You see that what he's actually doing is really working. And even just the way that he's handling the preseason. He talked about that first preseason game against the Colts that he underlined win, win, win on his clipboard, because he's like, if we are going to play the game, we're going to win the game. And we're 2-0 in this, and I think we're looking same exact thing tomorrow with the Cardinals. Can't wait to break that down. Cannot wait to watch. The big question truly is, what is roster cut downs going to look like, and who are the most likely guys to not make the 53-man roster? Pulling up an article here on Mile High Huddle. They do a great job here of talking about who might be on the bubble. The first crazy name to see here is Jarrett Stidham. That was one of Sean's first moves when he got to Denver, knowing that he didn't have high hopes that Russ was going to be able to execute a system. So he went out and gave the bag to Stidham, and at one point he was one of the highest paid backups in the NFL. And so could Jarrett Stidham be on the bubble? And I think Stidham is a fantastic backup. I don't think you will see, like, if something happens, and I do not think this is going to be what actually happens, but if Bo Nix through 5 games is 0-5 and he has twice as many interceptions as he does touchdowns, you could see a world where Sean Payton's like, hey, we need to pivot. Let's give this team off to, it wouldn't be Jarrett Stidham. I think he'd be like, hey, let's see what Zach Wilson can do with this team. So I think Stidham is great if Bo Nix gets the wind knocked out of him, gets a concussion, has to go out. Like, I think he could finish a game for you. But I think we've all seen Stidham's ceiling, and I love him. I like him on this team, and just thinking of what he's done to the culture of this team. He's a real team guy, organizing Camp Stiddy out in Texas this year and throwing at the receivers, and you just see his leadership. But I don't see him actually like getting the reins of this team and running it himself. So I kind of hope we keep him as a backup, although we do save $7 million in cap room if we were to move on from him. Other big names to look at here, Damari Mathis. There wouldn't necessarily be a ton of cap savings here, but we've seen Riley Moss look great. We're feeling good about Levi Wallace. And then Chris Abrams-Drain has come out and just balled out of control. And although he is only a rookie and he's kind of slightly built, I have way more hope in what Abrams-Drain could be. And so I could see this also being a cut. Palczewski, I cut him in my Madden franchise league, so maybe he misses the cut. This one here is interesting. Samaje Perine, I think because of that interception in the preseason game against the Colts, like, that's been kind of a red mark next to his name. He was Russell Wilson's favorite dump off target on third down, and he still has been playing all third down all throughout training camp and the preseason. And so this would be kind of a shocking one. He's also a big voice in that locker room as well. Those are the ones I'm looking at. And then the big question here would be, do we keep Nate Adkins in or fullback Michael Burton? And we know Sean Payton likes to have a fullback and loves Michael Burton, but he would be, in that already very crowded running back room. And so instead, do you bring up a guy who can play both fullback and tight end in Nate Adkins rather than a guy who just is your fullback? So all those are really interesting things to watch. Can't wait to see. Sean Payton is going to put in some guys who are supposed to be starters on this team, but were kind of dinged up in training camp and didn't have a chance to see them in actual game situations. So that's going to be DJ Jones and Brandon Jones, both guys I'm excited to watch for sure in preseason action against the Arizona Cardinals. All right, I teased it at the open. Crazy situation here. So the Los Angeles Chargers were in Dallas for a preseason game, and everyone's worst nightmare happened, and several players and people traveling with the team were locked in an elevator. And my big question for the chat is, if you had to be locked in an elevator with a couple current Denver Broncos on this team, like, who would be the coolest hang to be stuck in a locker room with? And then who would be like the last person you'd want to be stuck in the elevator with? And I think my answer might surprise you. The last person I'd want to be stuck in an elevator with, other than like maybe Ray Lewis and Aaron Hernandez, current Denver Broncos, Audric Estime, like, his arms would just be so big that I feel like I'd be really claustrophobic. And Bo Nix, as cool as it would be, I feel like he'd take off his backpack and just be like, sorry guys, we got a couple seconds here. I got to look at film. And he'd start rolling his IT band. And I just want to hang in the elevator with my boys. So those are the two I wouldn't want to be in an elevator with. I think Zach Wilson and Stiddy would be really fun to hang out in an elevator with. Like, Zach Wilson would have hilarious stories. Stiddy just seems like a really cool, chill dude to hang out with and be stuck in an elevator with. But I need y'all to tell me, who would you want to be stuck in an elevator with? Or who's the last person on this team you would want to be stuck in an elevator with? Also, Sean Payton, like, if you were stuck in an elevator with him, how many times would he say the word relatively? Like, oh, we got to get this elevator back up relative to the... He'd say it too much. But y'all are going to tell me what it is. Either way, we've got preseason action tomorrow, and then the real season is here, and I can hardly wait because we got a ton to believe in. Ooh, almost kissed it off the...